And you go on. Well, that's what I'm here today for. So to understand what is going on, we first kind of understand the author. So Franz Kafka. So Franz Kafka was born, I think it was the late 19th century, so before World War One. He was born into a German Jewish family in Prague. He studied classics and literature while getting his law degree, and here's the big thing. He, oh, by the way, he and his family, he had a very overbearing father, as it was, or at least that's what he says in his journals. We don't really know if it's true. He studied the classics and literature was really influenced that, particularly like the strange kind of offbeat stories as he was studying this. And he eventually worked in a bureaucratic role in an insurance agency. And I don't know if any of you have had the chance to work in an insurance agency before, but bureaucracy is this crazy, crazy thing that just doesn't make sense. Like there's rules and there's no reason for these rules, but they decide your life, they decide your fate. So a big part of Kafka's experience was probably that he was working in an insurance agency where he had to deal with a lot of these the absurdity and the meaninglessness of of life, right? Because people get injured, and oftentimes there's not really a good reason for them to get injured. Uh, well, anyway, in addition to this, he never married. He led a fairly private life, close to his friends, but and he eventually died of tuberculosis at age 40. But in between his job and in between his awful disease, he was able to write these really well, kind of disturbing stories that just seize the imagination, right? And part of it may have been because of his background. People, because he's a mysterious figure, because we don't really know too much about him. We know a fair bit, but not too much. We're not really sure what his stories are about. Some people think that it was because he was Jewish, and he was Jewish within a German-speaking world. All of his sisters died in Auschwitz, so that's one of the horrible things. So this alienation of being Jewish in a German state. Part of it might have been because of his own personal life. People speculate that he might have been bisexual, or that he never married. That might have been an issue, or just his personal illness, which alienated him a lot, or different family issues, which he wrote extensively of. Although it's not really clear. And the other thing too. Anyway, so from this arose Kafkaesque. And Kafkaesque is we use this now as a term whenever we have something that is completely insane, completely absurd, just doesn't make any sense at all, particularly with bureaucracy. And the thing we often forget about with Kafka is that Kafka actually thought his stories were really funny, which is interesting because they're always really dark, really dark. But he just thought it was he felt that life was that way, right? And the older you get, the more you start to understand this. In that you're given certain situations where you're like, oh my gosh, like okay, on the chat, has anyone ever been? Has anyone got their license yet? Has anyone ever been to the DMV? Go ahead and respond if you have. Or has anyone been to, let's say, the hospital for something? Actually, just go ahead and check in to make sure I can tell you guys are still listening. Anyone? Anyone? Anyway, I'll let you respond to that. But um, basically, you give it as you grow up or as you get older, you have to deal with these institutions. Thanks, Costa. You have to deal with these institutions like the DMV, like the hospital, that are insane. Hello, Terry. That are insane. Like with going to the flat. Thank you. Yeah. So there's no reason for them to be this painful. There's no reason. So when you read his stories, like there's a recognition of like, yeah, life's pretty much like this. So some of his stories, we have an artist who starves himself for people to watch. Another story is a man who discovers that he's now a bridge and people walk across him. A father who confuses his son with his best the son's best friend and orders the son to go drown himself, and the son just goes off and jumps in the river and dies. You have a horrifying one about a machine that carves the inmate's sentences into their skin. And then finally, you have his famous book, The Trial, which this man goes through this huge trial, and they never say what he's guilty of, so he can never defend himself. And Kafka would read these stories to his friends, and Kafka would burst out laughing because when you look at it from a certain perspective, it's like, yeah, that's totally true. Because none of Kafka's stories are realistic, but in another way, they're really realistic, if that makes sense. Let me show you an example of that actually from the Metamorphosis itself. Okay, so let me read this section right here. You can read it along me as I go, and we'll talk about it afterwards. So, Gregor's just turned into a section. These are the following paragraphs. Gregor's glance turned to the window. The dreary weather, the raindrops were falling audibly down on the metal window ledge, made him quite melancholy. Why don't I keep from sleeping a little longer and forget all this foolishness, he thought. But this was entirely impractical, for he was used to sleeping on his right side, and in his present state he couldn't get himself into that position. No matter how hard he threw himself to his right side, he always rolled back again to his back. He must have tried 100 times, closing his eyes so that he would not have to see the wriggling legs, and gave up only when he began to feel a light, dull pain on his side, which he had never felt before. Oh, God, he thought, what a demanding job I've chosen. Day in, day out, on the road. Stresses of the trade are much greater than the work at the head office. And in addition to that, I have to deal with the problem of traveling. The worries about the train connections, irregular bad food, temporary and constant changing human relationships, and never come from the heart. To help with it all, he felt a slight itch at him. He pushed himself on the back, closer to the bedpost, so that he could lift his head a little more easily. Found the itchy part, was entirely covered with small white spots. He did not know what to make of them, and wanted to feel the place with a leg. But he reacted immediately, for the contact felt like a cold shower all over him. So, basically what's happened here. So, this guy, well, actually, let me ask you guys this. What's strange about this? So he's just turned into an insect, a giant monstrous insect. What is his first thought? What is the first thing that he thinks about? Go ahead and respond to the chat in the chat. Does he seem horrified by this? Does he seem like really distressed by this? What's strange about this passage right here, besides the obvious? What's strange about how he reacts? And go ahead and respond in the chat. And just throw out any idea. And if you don't understand it, that's perfectly fine. We'll explain it in just a sec. Oh no. Let's see. Any responses so far? Sorry. One second, guys. Where'd the chat go? Okay. Well, anyway, I actually lost the chat, so I can't see it. But basically, the idea is he wakes up in the morning, he sees that he's a giant insect, and what's his first thought? His first thought is, I don't have time for this. I'm just going back to sleep. Because that's totally realistic, right? If you turned into a giant insect in the middle of the day, what would your first thought be? Oh man, I can't deal with this. No, not today. Not today. And he has to go back to sleep. And then his next thought isn't about being a giant insect. It's about his job that he hates, right? So, in a way, this is completely like fantastic and completely fiction. But on another way, it's completely realistic because it's like, yeah, that makes sense. People actually act like that. So that's one of the great things about reading Kafka. And makes him such a great writer because on the one hand, you have all this stuff which is completely fantasy, completely almost like from a dream. And really, I think that Kafka a lot of his inspiration from like the dreamlike state. He wrote in the middle of the night. I think that helps. But on the other hand, it's completely realistic because people would exactly like this, right? So that is the start of the metamorphosis. And as we go on through the metamorphosis, so the basic overview of the story is this. So Gregor Samsa discovers that he's been turned into a monstrous thing. The original German doesn't actually specify whether he's a bug or not, and that's actually very important. The German just suggests that it's a unclean animal, right? Or unclean thing, right? Basically that he's a thing. Well, Gregor, despite his best efforts to show up to work for his salesman job, is horrifies everybody, his family, and the representative who comes to the office to help him out. Because of this, Gregor can no longer support his family, and Gregor becomes a burden to his family. Now, here's where the story really gets started, and what's really interesting, because the relationship between Gregor and his family is one of Gregor, because of his basically ailment, becomes a almost parasitic on the family. He can't do anything for them anymore, and that was his main function. The family, on the other hand, begin to, well, you have to read the story. But the important thing is that Gregor transforms early on, and then he has an interior transformation in respect to the shape that he's taken on. In addition to this, his family, it's not so much that towards the end of the book there are slight physical transformations, but moreover there's a interior transformation that the family undergo. And the thing to really investigate with this thing, with this story, is who's really the monstrous one here? That's a really interesting thing, right? It's a very, very interesting thing. And it's important to remember where Kafka is drawing this from. I chose a picture here of Apollo and yeah, Apollo and Daphne, and this comes from the Roman poem, The Metamorphosis. And throughout this Roman poem, which Kafka drew kind of the name from, is there's this idea of the form of a person influences the soul of a person over time. So that's something really interesting and worth exploring as you go through this. All right. Now, this is a challenging book, or it's a short book, but there is some things that are a little challenging. So what we did is we found some resources for you, and we put them on this website. Go ahead and when you're ready, click on the link, or we can send it to you in Hangouts, either way, and go there, and you'll find all these great resources for you to use. Now, this is on the English 11 one, but as you can see, you can just go up to English 10, click on that, Unit Activity 1. You'll find this live stream and much more. All right, excellent. Okay, now, unit activity. So you're going to have two choices for your unit activity. The first one is a comparative essay. So with a comparative essay, you're going to find a real person and a real person who has experienced hardship. Just a hint, that's actually everybody. So choose a real, but here's a list, here's a few people who experienced a profound hardship that you can talk about. So to do this assignment, to make a great comparison essay, what you're going to have to do, what I recommend that you do, is first organize by category what the type of hardship that they have. To be honest, in doing this comparison essay, you're probably not going to find a lot of people who turned into giant insects. So that's probably going to be hard. But you are going to find people who experienced family hardship, physical hardship, psychological hardship, right? Hardship with body images, hardship with communication, hardship with this, that, right? Generalize those things. Then go ahead and read through the story and do the same thing for Gregor, right? Or look back through it and see, okay, what are the types of hardships that he has to deal with, right? Body, communication, pain, family, economics, etc. They're just all in there. They're just all in there. So go through, make a list, and then you go to the template that's put in there and go through and start filling this out. Make sure you have great research. But the template, once you have these general categories and facts with their respective person, it's going to guide you very easily. So right away, does anyone have any ideas of a person that they would like to write about? By the way, this can be this doesn't have to be famous. A famous person had a lot of resources on them, but this could be personal. This could be yourself. So, does anyone have anybody that they'd like to write about right away? Go ahead and answer in the chat. Let me bring up the chat real quick. And let's see the chat function. There we go. And present. So on that chat feature, say what person you would like to write about. Oprah, great choice. Oh, that was you. Okay, Oprah could be a good person. So you could do Steve Jobs, you could do Marilyn Monroe. I mean, all these people right here are great choices because there's a lot of research on them, and all of them had very profound struggles. Albert Einstein, Ringo, great choice. Great choice. Well, Ringo is probably doing. Ringo's still alive though, isn't he? He's a good choice because he thinks that ends up pretty good for Ringo, everything considered. Yeah. Yeah, it can be anybody. It can be anybody at all. It has to be real, right? So, so it can be somebody within your own life, right? So it can even be your parent, friend, even yourself. It can really be anybody. It just as long as they're a real person. So, Marilyn, excellent. Yeah, that's a good one. That'll be a good one. That'll be interest. Marilyn will be a very interesting one if you choose her for with issues with body issues as well, because she almost has the opposite problem that Gregor has. All right. Any more? Any more? And this is just to throw out ideas of what people might be interested in. You know, anything, buddy personal, anybody famous, really anybody at all. So if you're interested in researching other people, this is a pretty good one. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. The one thing to remember is use textual, cite your sources, and use textual information to back up what you say about Gregor. Right. So maybe you saying, okay, he has trouble communicating. Right. So after you say that, quote the passage of where he's having the trouble communicating. Right. Yes. He tries talking to everybody, and there's only the squeaking sound instead. Okay, excellent. All right, now that's the first choice, the comparative essay. There is another choice, and that is the creative short story. So this is going to be similar to the other one in that you're going to choose a real person. This can be either the people we discussed earlier, like we were just listing out. This could also be, something personal. This one can be you also. This is a good one if you want to write about yourself personally. So you're going to choose a real life person. And then you're going to dramatize their life into a story, basically. So when you're writing a story, there's a few rules that you really should pay attention to in order to make a successful story, right? This, sometimes you can get around them, but this is kind of the bare bones of it, right? The first thing, a story is usually not a whole summary of a person's life. There's a beginning and there's a end, right? It's going to be the most interesting part of their life, right? It could be the end of their life, could even be the start of their life, but usually it's bounded, particularly if we're only writing for a couple pages, right? If you want to write a autobiography, that's fine for 50, 100 pages, right? But here we only have 3, so we really need to choose the most interesting part of their lives, right? So one, find a part of their lives with a beginning and end. Next, find what they want in that part of their lives. So a story has for a story to happen, basically you have a protagonist and you have a main character basically, and then something, somebody, some idea, whatever that they want. And how a story works is the protagonist takes a step, as this chart here. By the way, this is a great chart. This comes from Robert McKee's Story. Excellent book about how to write stories. Excellent book for plays and films also. But the protagonist takes an action, right? So maybe the protagonist's object of desire is. Any suggestions? Any suggestions? To find a dog. Excellent. Let's say that his first action is he wants to find a dog, right? So his first action to find a dog, he wants to get a new dog for himself to not feel lonely anymore. So he goes down to the pet store to get a dog. Now that's his first action. Now, if everything goes according to plan, you don't really have a story because the story's over. As soon as you get what you want, the story's over, that ends, right? So there has to be a gap between the expectation and the result, right? Now, this gap could be anything, but it has to be something unexpected. And you'll find this in people's lives that this is actually literally true. People try to do something, and then something unexpected happens, right? They apply to college, and they find it's not what they expected. They start a job, it wasn't what they expected, so on and so forth. So, a gap happens. He goes, he tries to get the dog. They only have cats, right? So you decide, okay, fine, well, I'll get a cat, right? So maybe he decides, okay, second action, he'll take a risk and he'll get a cat, right? Well, now another gap has to happen up between his expectations of what you'd expect the cat to be in order for this to keep the story going. So he goes home, he buys a cat, and he finds the cat can talk. The cat can talk. Oh gosh. Right. And then he finds that so then he has to react to that. How is he going to react to that? Maybe he tries to talk with the cat and have a good relationship with the cat, right? So he tries that as his third action. But then he finds the cat's a jerk because it's a cat. It's a cat and it's a jerk. And it's trying to kill him. So he has to try to get it back to the pet shop before the cat murders him, right? And then finally, when he gets back to the pet shop, he's saved by a talking dog. And therefore he gets his dog, right? So really, that's a silly example, but it can be anything. And you notice that that actually has a plot line, right? So, the protagonist could want a glass of water. They could want friends. They could want to be safe. Really anything. And you'll find that everybody has these stories. This is basically how it works. Now, in addition to that, the one other thing you want to pay attention to is that a good story will shift between positive and negative values. So if only positive things happen, and this goes with the gap thing, right? If only positive things happen, then yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's nice for good things to happen, right? But then you don't really keep on watching that story, right? You just turn it off, right? On the other side, you don't want only negative things to happen because then you get depressed and you turn off the channel, right? So to keep people's interest, you want to switch between positive and negative events. Now, this is another way that you can organize your story, whether it's your life or a famous person's life. How does this person's life switch between ill fortune and good fortune, the bad and the good? And how does that escalate as it goes on, right? So that's pretty much it. Oh, yes, and then as you're writing, so first you want to get the story down. First you want to write out the whole story. Then you want to see how long the story is. If it's only about a paragraph, that's a little too short. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to dramatize the events. So use more details, more explanation, kind of drag it out longer to create more interest. And if you do that, you'll have a pretty great story. So those are your options. You can either write the essay. The essay has that very laid out outline to do this, do that, do that. You also have the creative story. The creative story is far more free flowing. I just recommend that you pay attention to protagonists, what they want, and then good good emotions versus negative emotions and balance those. But that one's a lot more free flowing. So, guys, what do you feel like doing? Oh, by the way, if you guys complete, or when you guys complete this assignment by Friday, you'll get an extra 5 points. So that's something to keep in mind. So, which would you like to work on? Would you guys like to work on the creative story, or would you like to do the comparative essay? Go ahead and answer on chat. Comparative essay. All right. Anyone else? Creative story. Comparative essay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Very cool. Anyone else? Creative story. All right. We have a writer. I have to admit, that's the one I kind of like that one myself. But both are great options. Both are great options. Ms. Lockman would do the comparative essay. So it just goes to show you, sometimes even teachers are wrong. But both are great. Comparative essay, great. Yeah, that one's going to be pretty straightforward as far as essays go. The outline is wonderful that we have in there. As long as you find these different types of hardships and you set them against there, it should be pretty standard. Okay. By the way, anyone else? Anyone else? And if you're not sure, that's fine. You can say if you're not sure. I think that's everybody. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so that is fantastic. Now, for the creative essay, or yeah, comparative essay, or both of them, either way. If you guys want additional help, there's a couple routes that you can go. One, you can, once you have a little bit of this written and some of this done, when you want to have someone see what you're doing, you can call your teacher. They'll send you over to an English teacher if they're not already an English teacher, and they'll help you out. And it only takes a little bit of time, but they can really form a great essay that way. Also, you can come into the library. We have the Chula Vista, Rolando, and Santee libraries open for everybody. Please contact your teacher so we can make an appointment for you. That's a great option. Finally, if you guys are interested, I'm going to have digital office hours on Wednesday. And on those digital office hours, it'll be kind of like this, but instead of going over the Kafka, we'll really be diving deep into the creative story thing. We'll probably be working over Google Docs. So, real quick before everyone goes, how would you guys like to get additional help? Would you like to get it through the teacher, through the library, or through the digital office hours? What do you guys think? And I, of course, recommend you guys to start it and see how it's going. But it's always nice to have a route of help. Something with the highest score too. Just between you and me. So how would you like to get help? Teacher. Aha. Very good. Anyone else? Doo-doo. Boop-a-doop-a-doo. Anyone else? Anyone else? Hello? Hello? Help me, I'm a bug. Anyway, okay, guys. Well, so it seems like Yatsiri would like teacher help. Is anyone else like that help, or does everyone else feel? Yeah, it feels pretty good. I can do this on my own. Boop-a-doo, boop-a-doo. Well, I guess that's all. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you had a good time. Be sure to read Metamorphosis. It is really a great story, and I tell you, the older you get and the more you have to deal with insane bureaucracy, the more you're like, yeah, this totally makes sense. All right. Have a great day, guys. Bye for now.